On Mustangs with an independent rear suspension, the way you change rear camber is with this eccentric bolt here. It has like a cam lobe on it, and when you spin it, it moves the upright in or out relative to the control arm, which changes the angle of the tire. Now, this is a fine way to do it from an OEM standpoint, but if you're going to be racing and you want to change camber in small increments repeatedly without having to mess with this bolt and measure it every time, there's a much better way to do it. The way we do that is with Camber Shims rather than an eccentric bolt. I'll show how these work. We're going to measure camber here with this magnetic angle finder on the brake disc so that the brake disc doesn't move around. We're just going to zip up some lug nuts on With the brake disc not moving anywhere, we can mount our angle finder on the hub surface. The suspension is just at full droop, it's just hanging out here. So the reading doesn't matter, it's just that we have to record it for reference going forward here. So right now it's at 1.2 degrees positive. So we're going to note that on the spreadsheet included in the instructions. When I loosen the camber bolt, you'll see what happens. There's quite a bit of slop in here. Look at that camber gauge move. We go from 1.4 to 1, maybe 1.1. This is why when you're tightening this thing down, I mean, you could still be oriented the right way, but your camber is going to vary 0.4 of a degree perhaps. I mean, yeah, these are just annoying to deal with. Now, while this is loose, I can show you how this works. When this cam on the bolt moves, it moves the upright, which changes the camber angle. But what happens is when you're tightening this bolt, sometimes you can't hold it still, or there's a little bit of slop in here, or there's a little bit of slop in the bolt. It's less than ideal, especially if you want to make consistent camber adjustments without having to have a camber gauge on it while you're doing it. Now that we have our baseline camber reading, we're just going to remove the eccentric bolt entirely. So this is the OEM style camber bolt with the cam on it. So what happens is when this cam spins, it moves the bolt in or out relative to the upper control arm. Well, instead of doing it by spinning this bolt in a cam, we use these shims that have slots in different locations that slide into the pocket in the control arm. Then we know exactly what the camber change is with each shim, and we never have to measure it again. Now remember also that there was some slop between the pocket and this eccentric bolt cam, and that is with the OEM bolts or even with this aftermarket bolt. What happens is these shims fit precisely in the pocket this way, and then this bolt fits very precisely in this slot in the shim. And that takes out a lot of the inconsistency in setting camber. These shims are designed to slide into the pocket of the Kenny Brown upper control arms perfectly. There is no slop here. It slides in perfectly. But if you have OEM upper control arms, I'll show you what you need to do. Here's a factory upper control arm with the machined pocket. Now for some reason, the width of this pocket from one control arm to the next varies, and I've noticed it varies quite a bit. I'm not sure why that is, but the point is, on the Kenny Brown control arm, the pocket is 1/520. And that's what this shim is, to fit that one, because that is the largest that I've seen. However, some OEM control arms like this one, their pocket is narrower. So if that's the case, you need to measure your pocket, and we'll measure this one. This one looks like 1/505. 1/504 looks like what we need to do. You need to measure both control arms, the left side and the right side control arm, and then find out which one, if they're both the same, great. If one is significantly larger or smaller than the other, you need to order another set of shims and file, sand, or grind down the shims to precisely fit each side control arm, and you'll have to have unique shims for each side. But that's the only way to do it, and the best way to do it to get consistent camber results. Also, if you look at this OEM control arm right here, there's a slot that's machined in it. Now, I have opened mine up a little bit more to get a bit more camber adjustment, and with these shims, you'll see that you can get more camber adjustment sometimes than what the OEM slot will allow. If that's the case, you just got to use a die grinder and carefully open it up. It's not complicated and you don't have to be super precise about it. As long as the bolt slides back and forth in the slot smoothly, that's what you need. Now I found the best way to get these to fit precisely in each control arm situation is with a belt sander. But you can also use a file, or you can also use a grinder, or whatever you're most comfortable with. You just obviously measure twice, grind once. And sometimes too, there'll be a little bit of a nub here, like from the laser cutter where it starts and stops. So the best way to clean that up too is just with a belt sander. Now I have my shims all sanded so they fit precisely in the control arms. And you can see there are 9 shims here. And each one is identified with a different number of notches in the top of the shim. And those notches tell you where the slot is relative to the center of the shim. So for example, position 0, slot or shim number 0, doesn't have any notches and the slot is in the middle. Shim number 8 has the slot all the way to one side. And now these are reversible because this one you can put them in either way. Here this slot is on the outside of the shim with the hole to the inside, and that shows you that it's a positive, it's in a positive position, but you can flip it around and have it be 8 in the negative position with the hole on the outside. So there are 9 shims, and that makes 17 different camber positions for one set of shims. 0 doesn't count twice, so that's why there's 9 shims, but there's 17 positions that you can have with these shims. The next step is to make sure that we have our slot wide enough to accommodate every adjustment shim that we have. Now here you can see that actually even on the Kenny Brown control arm, with the shim in position 8, the slot could be a little bit longer so we can take advantage of that additional negative camber setting. Now, if we put it to the positive side, it's actually quite good. It's close and it fits. But on the negative side, we could open it up a bit more to gain some more negative camber adjustment. So we're going to open that up with a die grinder. Now again, this step is optional, but we used a die grinder to open up the window in the control arm so we can get our maximum negative camber out of the with our camber shims. And we had to do both sides. So we had to do this side as well as this side so that the bolt slips in easily. So now we just slip our shim in here. We've machined it enough where the bolt just slips in nice and easy. This is how easy it is to change camber with camber shims. Right now we have the number 8 camber shim in there. It has 8 notches on it, and each camber shim is worth 0.2 of a degree of camber change. And so let's just say we want to go down 0.2 of a degree in camber. So this is all we got to do. First, we'll loosen up the bolt. We'll get the old camber shim out of there. If it doesn't slide out by itself, you can just kind of pry up on it with a wrench, give it a little bit of a tap persuasion out. So that's the number 8 camber shim. We're going to replace it with the number 7 camber shim. Now these are reversible, remember? So with the hole out, that's the same as the one that we had in there. This is just 2 degrees less. So we're going to pull on the upright just a little bit. Slides right in. Tighten it up. And then tighten it to 75 foot-pounds. Boom, done. We chose a shim that got us close to our baseline setting before we started. So for us, that was the number 7 shim in the positive camber direction. And then we just torqued the bolts to 75 foot-pounds. So hopefully now you can see why I love these things. They make life so much easier when you're trying to change camber. They're precise, they're quick and easy, simple, very repeatable. Exactly what you need. You don't want to be fiddling with those eccentric bolts.